Okay, welcome to the other lecture that we have here from Mammalogy on April 17th. So this one is going to be covering carnivores. So I didn't cut any species from the carnivore slides, so all the species that are in here should be the same that you have in the slides attached. I did cut a few skulls, so you'll be able to go and look at that skull video to make sure that the skulls you're studying are the really important ones. And as the other presentation, there will be a few skull characteristics I talk about in here that are not in that skulls video. And so those are things that I want you to know, but those are not exactly skulls that I want to be able to show you a picture of and you tell me what it is. So it's kind of the differentiation between this and that skulls video. The other thing I did cut from this were tracks. So last year or 2 years ago, I did add tracks into this, but due to time constraints, I cut them back out. Also, a lot of you are getting that track experience from going out, doing your track collection for the plaster cast. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started. So the first family we have is Canidae, which is our dogs. So in the United States, there's 8 different canid species. We have a few different wolf species, along with the coyote, and then we have a few different fox species as well. We can find 3 of these in West Virginia. So first is our red fox, which is Vulpes vulpes. This is an omnivorous species, so they feed on small mammals, lagomorphs, squirrels, birds, and their eggs, along with some plant material. The species will also go and cache food, and these prefer fragmented habitat. So for example, where we work up at Fort Drum, there's a lot of red foxes around that'll take advantage of both the wooded area and the open field area as well. The species is also mostly nocturnal, and the social unit is a mated pair, and they're solitary species in the winter. So a good identifying characteristic for the red fox is that white-tipped tail. If you have a white-tipped tail, usually you do have a red fox. Just because you don't have a white-tipped tail doesn't mean that it's not a red fox, but if you have that white-tipped tail, then yes, you do have a red fox. This red fox has the largest distribution of any carnivore in the world. They're thought to have been primarily in North America, but they became widespread through introductions. So if you go through any of those shaded in areas, you can find this species. Next is our gray fox, which is Urocyon cineo-argenteus. Once again, this is another omnivorous species, which a lot of these canids actually are. So these will feed on rabbits, rodents, inverts, and also fruit. These species tend to prefer hardwood forests, but you can also find them in older fields. And like the red fox, these are also mostly nocturnal and crepuscular. So that's the time that you typically find these to be active. A really interesting fact about these are that these are the only canid that climbs trees in North America. So there are other canid species around the world that climb trees, but within North America, this is the only canid we have that can climb trees. The gray fox is paired during breeding, but once again, it is solitary through the winter. Next is our coyote, which is Canis latrans. Once again, another omnivore, so these will eat fruits, insects, mice and voles, lagomorphs, deer, livestock. Pretty versatile species that'll take advantage of what it can find. The social unit is usually a mated pair, but occasionally they will run in packs. So packs is not the normal for a coyote, but you can find them to occur in packs. They're also habitat generalists, and they can be found in both urban and rural areas. And they also have a wide vocal range and pelage variation. So if you're into trapping, one of the things you'll see is that there are a lot of different pelages that you have from coyotes. And those different pelages are also, highly sought after. The species has also greatly expanded its range. It's thought that originally they were only found in a restricted range, I believe in the western United States. But they have been able to expand in the absence of other predators. There's also been large-scale control methods, but they've been largely unsuccessful. So people have managed to cut down coyote species, but typically it's very difficult to keep coyote populations low. And as soon as you ease up on those control methods, the populations will explode again. So it takes very constant management to have any kind of control of Canis latrans. So here are canine skulls. I'm only going to focus on those for a minute here. These are covered pretty well in the skulls video. But as I said in that video, all three of these has the 42 teeth. So take a look at that skull video. And then our last one is the gray wolf, which is Canis lupus. This is the largest member of the dog family, and it's also considered to be a keystone predator. So these feed on large ungulates, beaver, rabbits, a whole bunch of different species. It really depends on where you find them and what their pack structure is in that area, what they're capable of feeding on. The species was hunted to near extinction, but through a series of natural recolonizations. So for example, there were hotspots that held out in Minnesota, kept the wolf population. Of course, Canada did. So some of those are able to naturally recolonize. And then, of course, we had reintroductions, one of the famous examples being Yellowstone National Park. Within the pack structure, there tend to be a dominant male and female, and then the size of the pack varies greatly by your region. So if you're in the Midwest, the pack size is typically going to be somewhere around 2 to 4 wolves, very small pack size. If you go out west, you can have packs of 10 to 20 wolves. So it really depends what region you're in, how big the packs are. And here are the skulls again with Canis lupus added on. So like I said, just make sure to go over and look at that skulls video. So next is our order Carnivora and the family Felidae. So there are 37 species in the world. I'm going to breeze through this pretty fast because I know we had Kirsten come in and talk about her bobcat. She talked a little bit of the background. And then 2 were historically found in West Virginia. So first we have our bobcat, which is Lynx rufus. For the bobcat, they have a short tail and it has 3 to 4 brownish black bars on it. The tip of the tail and the underside of this are also white, so those bars on the tail do not go the whole way around the tail. They stay on the upper side. This is another carnivorous species, primarily feeding on rabbits, small mammals, grouse, turkey, frogs, so smaller prey. It can be found in woodlands, old fields, and also along the edges between wooded areas and more open habitat. Like a lot of these other carnivore species that we're seeing, they are nocturnal, and they are also active throughout the year, which of course most of those canid species are that we covered as well. And this species tends to hang out and is very solitary. It does not hang out with others of its kind. The other one that was historically found in West Virginia is the mountain lion, which is Puma concolor. So these tend to prefer more rugged mountains, so you'll find them really out west now. You can also find them up around Wisconsin. They also hang out in forested and swamped areas, so one of the more common swamp areas that you'll think of for this species would be where the Florida panther occur in southern Florida. The eastern species has been extirpated, and I believe it was recently pronounced to be extinct as well. The species is chiefly nocturnal and also very secretive, so it's rather hard to actually see these when they're around. And the diet is mainly deer, so they're capable of taking down rather large prey. This is also the largest feeder that purrs. So bobcat is one of the skulls you have to know, but mountain lion is not. One of the ways you can tell these two apart is the tooth count. So bobcat only have 28 teeth, while the mountain lion will have 30. So the mountain lion has an extra premolar behind its canines. Next is the family Ursidae. So for Ursidae, there are 3 found in North America, which of course would be our polar bear, our grizzly bear, and our black bear. There's only 8 bear species found in the whole world, and of course we have 1 species in West Virginia. So the species we have in West Virginia is the black bear, which is Ursus americanus. I do want to note that these skulls also have 42 teeth, like the canid species do. There is some variation in coat, so the color can vary from glossy black to brownish black, but you can also see cinnamon, chocolate, a blue, albino. So black bears, are not always going to be black, so that's something to keep in mind. The species is an omnivore, once again taking advantage of what it can find. It can also be a habitat generalist. A good example of this is that these species can be found, up around Cooper's Rock and Snake Hill in the wilderness, but they can also be found around cities and take advantage of dumpsters. So they're really able to survive wherever they really want. The species is primarily nocturnal, and they'll den under the roots of large trees or in a crevice, cave, or hollow tree. Even sometimes if you're going out looking for dens, they'll just lay under a pile of brush or under a single tree. The dens are not always, what you picture of them being, like down in a cave. The species is also not a true hibernator. Next is Procyonidae. So for Procyonidae, we only have one species, which is the raccoon, Procyon loader. Once again, another omnivorous species, taking advantage of what it can find. Very much so a habitat generalist. So you find them around forest edge, near water, but also, of course, they're taking advantage of urban areas. A lot of human trash they can take advantage of, dumpsters. Of course, you can find these all over the place. Species is mostly nocturnal. Of course, if you see them out and about during the day, these are rabies vectors, so that could be a reason why. They also have this bandit-like mask, a ringed tail, and excellent dexterity. So I'm sure some of you have seen their tracks when you've been out collecting tracks. And of course they have those more handprint-like track for their front feet. This is one of the skulls you also have to know, and the raccoon skull has 40 teeth. So next is our family Mustelidae. So Mustelidae includes weasels, otters, ferrets, skunks, badgers. So they're a very elongated type species. And they include North America's most endangered mammal, which of course would be the black-footed ferret. And there's 5 different species found in West Virginia. So first we'll start with the least weasel, which is the smallest of these, Mustela nivalis. They have very stubby legs like a lot of these weasels do. They also have a short tail that lacks that black tip. So one of the other species we'll see, the long-tailed weasel does have a black tip on its tail. They're chocolate brown above, and they also have white on their chin, throat, chest, and belly, so a white underside for the most part. In northern climates, their pelage can also change to white in winter, which is a feature we'll see in a few of these mustelid species. Their diet is pretty much all carnivorous, so voles and mice, shrews, insects, birds. And of course, all of these weasel species have a high metabolism, so they're required to eat a lot for their body size. They prefer brushy areas, which would be old fields. Fence rows is a really common place to find them. We've also found weasels taking advantage of rock walls. So variety of habitat, but they really like to have some cover. The species is nocturnal and active year-round, and they nest in ground burrows. This is not one of the skulls you have to know, but you will have to know some of the other mustelid skulls. And so all of these skulls generally have this elongated shape. And really, one of the things they make you think of are the animals from Alien. So if you look at the aliens in the movie Alien, it's a very similar skull structure to what you'll see in that movie. Next is our long-tailed weasel, which is Mustela frenata. This is one of the skulls that you'll have to know. So once again, you're having these stubby legs, a slender body, and one of the important characteristics for this is the black-tipped tail. It's also worth noting that the least weasel and the long-tailed weasel, there's a very big size difference between the two. And these are a lot larger than that least weasel is. So you're going to have that rich brown back, and then a white chin, and then a yellowish or buffy brown belly. So that'll be more of a yellowish kind of color on the underside going the whole way back. Once again, a very similar diet, voles, mice, rabbits, chipmunks. The habitat can be variable for these, but once again, one of the common areas you might find it would be around fence lines and rock walls. This species is primarily nocturnal, but it is active year-round. And once again, they'll nest in ground burrows, under stumps or beneath rock piles. It's a very similar nesting habitat. And within the species, you'll find delayed implantation for reproduction. So next is our mink, which is Neovison bison. Very similar to the other weasels, but then once again, this is a good step up in size. So these are a lot larger than even our long-tailed weasels are. They're also a lot more uniform in color, so they don't have that white underside like you'll see in the least weasel and the long-tailed weasel. The only coloration that they might have is a white patch on the chin and throat. So the diet for these, they tend to be found more around aquatic systems, so usually near water, making them really good swimmers. So they'll feed more on crayfish, frogs, fish, small mammals, and snakes. Things typically you'll find around these water systems. And once again, the species tends to be nocturnal and active year-round. Next is the fisher, which is Picanha benanti. So the fisher is the largest of these that we're looking at here, at least with that general mustelid shape. Carnivorous, once again, small mammals, carrion, rabbits, porcupines, so getting a little bit larger in the prey that it's able to take. The habitat, you're really thinking of extensive and that continuous canopy forest cover. So areas where you might find it around here would be like Cooper's Rock. You can find them up there for sure. They're just a larger species that you're going to find more often in trees than the other weasels and minks that we find. Their coloration is pretty continuous throughout, but it's a little bit more of a grizzled on the back and kind of a dark coloration. So you're looking for that grizzled color and more of a continuous color throughout. And once again, these are active year-round, but they can be active anytime. They're not as purely nocturnal as some of these other species are. This is also a skull you have to know. And then when you're looking at mustelid skulls, this is one of the few that really has a pronounced sagittal crest. So that's a good identifier for these skulls. So next is the river otter, Lontra canadensis. Once again, another elongated species, and then this one is also semi-aquatic. So you're going to find it more near water systems like the mink. And I would say that this one is even more aquatic than the mink is. They have very obvious whiskers on their face, and they also have small eyes and ears. And their diet is also very similar to the mink, crayfish, fish, snails, and snakes. These are pretty much always associated with water. So if you go out, you're around some of the larger river systems in the state, you might see some river otter tracks around the outside of them. River otters tend to be crepuscular, and they're also active throughout the year. And this is another species that displays delayed implantation. So they can delay implantation for 9 to 12 months, and they tend to have 1 to 5 young born in late winter or early spring. Once again, this is another skull that you'll have to know. Alright, so our next family is Mephididae, which is going to be our skunks. First up is the striped skunk, which is Mephitis mephitis. So once again, these are going to have a varied diet, very much omnivorous once again. So they're going to be fond of bees and yellow jacket, ground nest. So they'll search out those, but they'll also eat fruits, nuts, roots, along with small mammals and eggs. So very much a generalist when it comes to diet. They're also a generalist when it comes to habitat. So you'll find these very commonly around wooded areas, but you can also find them around fields. The species tends to be nocturnal, and they den in winter. Also, when you're looking at these skunks, they have a similar skull to our weasels, which is one of the reasons I didn't include them. If we had been doing these in person, this is a skull I would have liked to include, but they're very similar to that weasel shape, so I didn't want to go ahead and go into that confusing. So this is not one of the skulls you would have to know. And the other skunk we'll talk about is the spotted skunk, which is Pelageo putorius. So the spotted skunk can be found in West Virginia, but typically it's not going to be. The striped skunk is a lot more common. The spotted skunk might be found in the eastern panhandle or in the southern region of the Appalachian Mountains. But currently research on it is going on in the eastern panhandle. West Virginia DNR is working with a grad student from Frostburg to study this population. Diet is very similar to Mephitis mephitis, but these consume more meat, such as small mammals. They tend to prefer open forests with rocky outcrops, so they will den around those rocky outcrops at the base of trees. The species is highly nocturnal, and they will den throughout the winter. It's really a species that's been started to be studied more, so a lot still needs to be found out about this species. Alright, so that is the end of this presentation. So like I said, the slides for this pretty much line up with the presentation that I gave. There shouldn't be anything cut out between the two of them. If you have any questions about any of these presentations, please just let me know, and I hope you got something out of this. Great. Thank you.